During the 18th and 19th centuries, many aspects of American life were adopted by some Cherokees who viewed assimilation as the best survival tactic against American expansion. One such adoption was the practice of chattel slavery. In this Cherokee Almanac, we look back on an uncomfortable part of Cherokee history, the Cherokee Slave Revolt.
Slavery in the U.S. and in the Cherokee Nation was not practiced by most, but it's still part of all our history. It's something that none of us are proud of, and it's a little-known fact that the Indian nations participated in this, but it is important that we know that part of history.
By the early 19th century, most Cherokee hunting grounds had been invaded by or ceded to white settlers. The United States was actively enforcing a civilization policy toward Native Americans designed to erode traditional Cherokee social structures. As some Cherokees assimilated to Eurocentric views of agriculture for profit, some also began to implement the so-called civilized practice of chattel slavery. By 1835, nearly 1,600 people were enslaved by Cherokees.
In the Cherokee Nation, it was actually 8% of the people that owned slaves, and 50% of those slaves were owned by 3 different owners, the main one being Joe Vann.
Rich Joe, like his father, was a very shrewd merchant, and he became the wealthiest man in the Cherokee Nation.
Joseph Vann, or Rich Joe Vann as he was known, was forced from his home in Georgia in 1837, 1 year before Cherokee removal. Vann traveled from the old Cherokee Nation by steamboat on the Arkansas River, finally settling in Indian Territory near Weber's Falls.
When he landed here, he had 2 steamboats, 2 wives, 150 slaves, and the fastest quarter horse in the world. He and Chief Ross, his brother, grew cotton crops, and they put the cotton on steamboats and took it back east to sell it.
Once established in Indian Territory, Joseph Vann's business operations continued with relatively few obstacles, until one night. At 4 a.m. on November 15, 1842, a faction of people enslaved by Rich Joe Vann barricaded the doors to the Vann home, trapping those inside. The group took guns, ammunition, food, mules, and horses, including Rich Joe Vann's prized racehorse.
The plan was to go to Mexico, where slavery was illegal. They then robbed a local store to get more supplies, and approximately 25 slaves took off and headed towards the Creek Nation.
In the Creek Nation, more enslaved people joined the revolt, raising the group's total number to more than 35. As the group continued southwest, they were pursued by a Cherokee and Creek search party. Eventually, the 2 groups collided near the southern border of the Creek Nation along the Canadian River.
The escaping slaves had a battle by the Canadian River where they disbanded the spot and forced the Cherokee and Creek party to retreat. In doing so, they lost 12 slaves that were captured and 2 were killed.
Following the battle, those remaining continued on their path to Mexico when they encountered yet another obstacle: 2 slave hunters who had captured 8 escapees from the Choctaw Nation, 5 of which were children.
And when they came across those slave hunters, they ended up killing them and freeing the Choctaw slaves, and they then joined the party and moved forward.
At this time, the Cherokee National Council passed a resolution authorizing Captain John Drew to head an 87-man militia to seek out and capture those participating in the revolt. The militia caught up to the group north of the Red River, just 7 miles from the southern border of Indian Territory.
When they found them, they were in poor shape. They didn't have enough supplies to get across that rugged country.
After all the miles traveled and the conflicts endured, the escapees were captured and taken back to the Cherokee Nation. The group was escorted to Fort Gibson, where 5 of the rebels stood trial and were executed for the murder of the bounty hunters. The rest were returned to their Cherokee, Creek, and Choctaw owners. Those returned to Rich Joe Vann were sent to work aboard his steamship, the Lucy Walker. In 1844, the ship exploded when Van drunkenly ordered the workers to overheat the boiler. Van was killed in the accident, along with most on board. Slavery in the Cherokee Nation continued until the Cherokee National Council passed two Emancipation Acts in 1863. The abolishment of slavery was then ensured forever in the Treaty of 1866, and Cherokee freedmen were awarded tribal citizenship.
You learn from the mistakes in history. Not to mention Cherokee history, Black history, it's all a part of American history. So it's all our story. We all need to know these stories.